Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Inworld review. If my voice is sounding a wee bit faint or flaky, it's because we've had to make some last-minute adjustments to our sound. So instead of introducing my highlight clips immediately, I'm going to do a little thing which is called passing the buck. And I'm going to hand over to my partner, Tara Yates, for her take on the week before we go any further. So over to you, Tara.
Thanks, Mal. Yes, there's nothing like trying to get something launched and discovering that something isn't working. That's been the case today with Mal and headphones. So I'm sure he'll be back with us as soon as he sees if his headphones will actually work. Anyway, greetings, everyone, to Inworld Review. This is Sunday. It is the 19th of January, and it is the year 2014. And the fact that I'm able to get the date and the year and the century correct is an accomplishment. So there you have it. In my corner of the virtual of the RL Sim, it is slightly overcast or foggy. And temperatures rather mild, like in the high 40s, which is kind of nice, although our air quality is suffering a bit. Anyhow, we have a number of guests with us today, and we'll get to those in a bit. And I have a few news items that I'll go through here while Mal's getting himself organized.
May I just intervene and test if I'm with you?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, indeed. So we're away. But, we are away on a different computer. So carry on, Tara, and I'll join in the fun when you finish.
Thank you. Good. Well, let's see. I think that perhaps the first thing to cover is a bit of eat your vegetables, since there were a couple of things from the lab this week, including a blog post in their technology tools and technology section about the HTTP project, which is probably guaranteed to cause many people's eyes to sort of glaze over as they attempted to read through this. And actually, oh, phooey, now I can't remember who did this. There's another blogger who did a wonderful job, I think, of clarifying just exactly what this means for those who aren't geeks. And her summary is the abbreviated point of the Second Life official blog post is communication between our viewers and the servers is going to be better and does and will use less bandwidth. This means fewer problems logging into Second Life, more reliable connections, and fewer disconnects. Changes will mean fewer capabilities from routers and gateways will be used, allowing the less expensive routers, and you may have a router sitting in your very own living room, to handle Second Life better. And in general, things will download better. So that's for the Cliff Notes version, I think that's a particularly good summary of things that is the real takeaway from this. She goes a little further, and there's a bit that I thought was rather good. The Second Life servers, or any servers, are there to serve. Gosh, imagine that. But the services they provide must be requested. The Second Life viewer makes those requests. When you start the viewer and log in, the viewer makes a request to gain access to the Second Life system. Login servers verify your login information and grant or deny access. In other words, this is a request-response system. Each viewer request takes time. Think of your phone and calling someone. Time is spent in the dial process, connection process, and the delay until someone answers. It's the same sort of thing with servers. In the case of the lab, what's been going on between servers is that there has been an individual call made for every download request. In other words, every time there's something to be downloaded, your computer's sending requests to the Second Life servers saying, give me this. And then it's like it hangs up, it gives you that, it hangs up, you have to call again to get the next item. So what they're doing is eliminating that duplication. Rather than make individual calls for each download request, the system will make a single call and, while connected, make multiple requests. Smart, huh? Yeah, so it saves a lot of overhead. making breaking connections with servers. So that's what is in process. Some of it has already happened. Some of it is still going on. And obviously there's two parts of this equation. There's what's going on the server end with Second Life, and there's also what changes in the viewer end to accommodate all that. So that's kind of the whole picture there. This isn't the sort of thing that's flashy like adding mesh or some of the other things that they've done. The interesting viewer, which has had an upgrade this week, and things that are obvious to the to the naked eye, as it were. But they're the things that truly make a difference in the quality of our experience of virtual worlds. So and I would expect that if it hasn't trickled into the into OpenSim and OpenSim viewers, probably will be very fast once the changes from Second Life have taken place. So I'm sure Maria may have some information on this that she might be willing to share later. There's also an interesting point that an RPA came up with on this, and that is in connection with this week's announcement, or this week's U.S. Court of Appeals ruling that overruled the net neutrality rules adopted by the U.S. Federal Communications Commission in 2010. And the concern was expressed as to the possible future impact of that on Second Life users on the basis of the bandwidth required by the platform for sewer viewer communications. Yeah, I'll say that one 3 times. Yeah, Second Life sewers.
Well, that sounds quite appropriate.
Yeah, I like that one. And she said, well, there's no guarantee people will not be affected. People should not find their use of Second Life adversely impacted. And that certainly these improvements in bandwidth use and stuff, the HTTP project would be a benefit to that. And that is all, of course, what happens with that Court of Appeals ruling is anybody's guess. I mean, this isn't over by any means. So that's a whole nother subject of net neutrality. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Yeah. What she also said on it was the fruits of the labor on HTTP have already been released server side, and viewer changes are now reaching the point where they will soon be filtering into viewers of all flavors. It's been moved from a project viewer to release candidate, so those changes are being rolled into release candidate viewers, or it is in at least one release candidate viewer. Okay, so that's the gist of the Eat Your Vegetables section for today. Oh, wonderful meme. Strawberry Sing definitely gets points for this one. Her blog has raised the meme of the week, the Monday meme, brought to you by Ms. Cara Trapdoor, with the suggestion of practical jokes in Second Life. The meme instructions are: share one or more practical jokes that either you have played on others or others have played on you in World. If you have pictures or videos to share, even better. Don't forget to leave a link to your post in the comments. So if you have a good practical joke you've been the victim of or done in Second Life, you want to make a trip over to Strawberry Sing. That's strawberry as in the berry, SINGH.com, and add your comment to the thread there. Great fun and good ideas. So you can start getting warmed up, and it's time. Good time in the winter when we're, it's nasty outside. When being inside and in Second Life is a great place to be. Let's see. High Fidelity. We've mentioned High Fidelity, which is Philip Rosedale's current project before. And for those of you who have missed it this week, High Fidelity is currently taking applications for an alpha phase of their new project, which is whatever Philip Rosedale's latest answer to virtual worlds is, which obviously involves better use of more gadgetry. Anyway, so you should go over to highfidelity.io to sign up for that if you're a creator. What will happen is you'll get a link to a questionnaire, which has a bunch of questions about what sorts of things you do, what you have in the way of computer access, both what your platform, what you're running, and your bandwidth and some of that kind of stuff. What sorts of gear you have already in the way of extras like Oculus Rifts and stuff. And who knows who will end up in that alpha testing group, but they're looking for creative sorts. So there's your chance. And for those who are interested in different kinds of creative sorts in Second Life, who have always wanted to be involved in some devilry, the producers who are doing the Paradise Lost production, yes, in Second Life. Yes, Paradise Lost. They are looking. They are still taking. They're taking. They're looking for casting for 6 parts for that they have not yet cast. So you too can try out. And this is voice talent. You don't have to do the avatar piece, which isn't that nice. For Beelzebub, Moloch, Belial, and Mammon. And Moloch also plays Noah. And let's see, there's another one who also plays somebody else. It's not in my notes. Anyway,
they'll find out.
Yeah. Anyway, Belial can be a female or a male. So this is not just limited to guys, but Beelzebub and Moloch and Mammon are all male parts. They will give fully costumed and kitted avatars for the production. They do not need you to have any experience, technical know-how, or to voice act, mainly seeking people with reliable internet connections and reasonably modern computers who can commit 2 hours a week to do their part. Rehearsals begin the first week of March. Shows will be scheduled on Saturdays or Sundays. The Saturday time is 1 p.m. Second Life time. The Sunday time collides completely with this show. So they'll also ask people to commit for a 12-week season, which will be March, April, May, and June of this year. If you're interested, yes, just a minute. I've got a link here. A link to. Oh, phooey, where'd it go? Come on. I know I had it. Canary Beck, B-E-C-K, Inworld. Harvey Crabsticks. Name and information you feel is relevant, no later than Friday, January 31st. And I know you can find a link at Nara Pay's blog for that. I had a link. I thought I copied it, but it didn't. It's not standing out here in my notes. So let's see. Oh, one other little item in the Eat Your Vegetables section, not quite. There's a code for supporting Oculus Rift is in the pipeline for a release.
Yay!
Although it is not clear whether this will be a project viewer or a release candidate when it appears. So that's a little teaser update on that. And I think that's everything I have right now. So I will toss it back to you, Mel.
Well, thank you, Tara. And hopefully we've got our vocal system in all good order. Amazing what the same headset in a laptop does what the other one wasn't doing, wherever I put it. So, yes, thank you, Tara. And indeed, the second trailer for Paradise Lost will be up in the show later in the machinima section. And apologies, by the way, for folks who are watching live. The machinima section actually started before we came live. I was indisposed at the moment. I was meant to do the queue. Anyhow, we're here now. So I'm just going to quickly point out a few things I've opened before I get round to our guests. Andromeda, City of Nidus, blogspot.co.uk. This is actually Will Burns' blog. Will was with us last week, of course. Rather interesting article he published today called Altered Reality. I won't go into details. It's too long an article, really, but a lot of people have retweeted it. So the early one is City of Oh dear, oh me! I'm gonna have to put my glasses on in order to just read this thing to you. It's not the most friendly of ills, but never mind. City of Nidus. That's CITYOFNIDUS.blogspot.com, and you'll find this article there on Altered Reality. I've been reading Daniel Voyager's blog, as we do every day, day in and day out. And he published a recent blog on the new development roadmap in 2014 for the grid called Inworlds. That's Inworld with a Z on the end, and it's an open sim grid, which is a walled garden grid at the moment, rather like Second Life as opposed to open sim. But he's got a fairly big roundup of all sorts of things they're planning to add as features and fixes and the usual stuff basically. We had a very interesting article at Forbes magazine earlier in the week. Those of you who don't know Forbes, well, I'll be surprised. Very serious magazine. The title of the piece was called Lego Heroin: Is virtual reality our next hard drug? Now, a very serious magazine, but a rather what I call lowest common denominator type newspaper headline. But it's serious. There's some very serious things to be discussed here. Basically, it's paralleling the immersion, dependency, and things like that with the use of chemicals, should we say? And it's really taking seriously the idea that we could be moving into a point where we're hardwired to things like the Oculus Rift. Well, I don't know, that's a bit big to be hardwired to, but nevertheless, very interesting article. So if you go to Forbes.com, and you'll have to look for it, really. My link is /sites and then no, I think I might be able to manage this. Another complicated link. Why can't people do quick Tico links or something? /sites /Stephen with a V and then Kotler. It's all one word. So Stephen, Kotler. And hopefully that will get you to his piece. Now, many of you will know of a company called K0. They sort of monitor and do user charts, usually every quarter or so on virtual worlds. They've actually had a few up recently. Their self-imposed brief covers all sorts of virtual worlds, including what many of us would actually call games. They basically have a broad view of the whole landscape of immersive spaces, be they for fun, pleasure or profit, I suppose. Does that cover everything? I don't know. Oh, yes, education too. Anyway, the interesting thing is on their blog this week, they've actually announced Virtual Reality News Weekly and issue 1. This is a newspaper that will come by the old-fashioned email to you. All you've got to do is go to their site and sign up for it, and they'll email it to you. So if you want to check out that, go to K0, that's a K, and then zero.co.uk, and /blog/Virtual Reality News Weekly. And you'll find all the details there. I'm sure you can just go to K0 and find it easily enough too. Virtual fashion technology. This is very curious because a lot of people, when we hear of virtual fashion, we think of the Inworld stuff where people are selling costumes for you to wear, just as a strange, not possible in real life thing I'm wearing at the moment. Or maybe it is possible in real life. I have to see about that one day if I can afford it. It'd be lovely to have a match, wouldn't it? However, it's a lot more serious than you might think, because in some cases, costumes that have been devised in world have actually found the market out of the world, so to speak, in your high streets, or at least in the designer boutiques. And likewise, an increasing number of fashion designers are using places like OpenSims or even Second Life to sort of prototype their ideas. And if they are in somewhere like Second Life, of course, they can try and sell it for a nominal price and gauge the popularity of a costume. And sort of, if they sell 100 in world, and only say sell 10 of their others, they can fairly assume that the one that sells 100 is more popular. And although it's not a good marketing demographic, it might give them an idea which is going to be the most popular in the real world too. So they approach this from many different angles. Anyway, they have an article at fashiontech.wordpress.com this week. It was dated January 14th, saying, for clothing designers, virtual models are faster than the flesh. And basically, they go into the whole thing. They actually talk quite considerably about a company called Body Labs, who license technology. They go into the whole thing of interaction with virtual worlds, and of course they address the issue of the idea that you might soon, log into a shop and get an avatar, and you actually better try costumes from a real world shop on as an avatar and get them to fit and stuff like that. Or maybe go into a boutique on your high street and they'll have something like that, a booth for you to go into, where they will use the virtual system of some sort for you to actually try things on. And we all know how ubiquitous fashion is in the Western world, at least. So that could be a sort of play to watch out for, I think. And yes, I have another link here to www.richardlevesqueauthor.com. That's Richard and then LEVESQUEAUTHOR.com. And that's all one word, by the way, except for the .com bit. And had an article up, very, very, very straightforward article, actually, just called The Appeal of Virtual Worlds. And it's of a broad spectrum. And I think this author is actually a science fiction writer. So he's really dealing into parallels between the imagination of science fiction and the way virtual worlds are being created. So it's a good sort of overview, probably nothing too revealing for people who know this sort of thing. But if you haven't interested in science fiction too, a nice little article he produced there. And right, that seems to be it. I have yet to re-establish my links on the crushed computer to my Inworld news, so we'll cover all that later. Our focus actually for the beginning of the show anyway is going to be, I think, less to do with Second Life and more to do with things in general. So I'd like to introduce our guests. I'd also like to thank our machinimotograper, the person who is filming us in World today, and that is Meek. So thank you for being here, Meek. And I'm looking on the monitor, and you're doing an absolutely wonderful job. So thank you very much indeed. On the seats here, I've got one regular guest. She was with us last week, and it's great to have her back already. She actually has a load of news for us. So it's Maria Korolov. Welcome, Maria.
Well, thank you for having me, Mel. I always love joining you guys.
And it's always wonderful to have you. And for once, I didn't chase you. You chased me, which was even better.
Well, I didn't want to get an email from you 5 minutes before when I was out somewhere driving around. Though I wouldn't have been driving in the snow. We've got a couple of feet out here.
Oh, but, Lord. Yeah. It's just not going away, is it? Okay, well, I'm going to come back to you in a second, because I know you have lots of news, so you can do a news piece for me. But we're also joined, I'm very pleased to say, by Rhiannon Chatnoir. Many of you know her as Joyce Bettencourt too. Welcome, Rhiannon.
Hello, Mal and Tara, and hi, Maria. Nice to be here as well.
Rhiannon, of course, is something we haven't. I'm hoping we'll discuss a bit later. Is the non-profit commons, which is well, there's a regular weekly thing in Second Life, but of course it goes beyond that. And also, of course, you work with Flea at Avacon, so we've got a whole load of OpenSimi type stuff to address here. But I'd like to start with Maria, rather than just get into a conversation with you, as it were. I know you have some kind of breaking news pieces to announce first, so maybe you'd just like to run us through those, and then we'll continue from there.
Okay. The big news this week is our monthly grid report, which is also the first grid stats report of the year. And so in 2013, OpenSim finally started to occupy more than 50% of the land of the Second Life / OpenSim metaverse. And I'm lumping those two together because unlike other platforms like Protosphere or Blue Mars or Cloud Party and so forth, OpenSim and Second Life share a common set of protocols and viewers, and have another thing in common, and that is the way the grids are laid out on a checkerboard pattern, so you can quickly estimate the land area of grids and compare their growth, which you can't do with any other platform. Everyone else is room based, where you teleport from one room to another, and the rooms aren't really connected in any kind of geographic way. I personally like the checkerboard map aspect of it because it feels more real. It feels more like a real space than just, one little virtual room that you can teleport to another virtual room. So right now, the OpenSim share of the public land on these two platforms is 56%. We've got over 200 public grids and over 33,000 regions, compared to a little over 26,000 regions in Second Life. But just today, I also ran some numbers for the size of the dark metaverse. And the article just posted a few minutes ago, so you guys are hearing about it first. But this week, I contacted a bunch of OpenSim hosting companies. Now, none of them would, or a few of them, would give me the numbers, how many grids they're actually hosting. They would just say something like, we have several hundred, without getting any specific. But then I asked them, what percentage of your sims are on public grids and what percentage are on private grids? So private grids would be like schools and companies or individuals using the grids for building or creative work or whatever you use it. I don't want to know the details. So so their estimates went from 20% private to 75% private, depending on the focus of the company. The companies that served white label grids, like if you want to set up a commercial grid like Inworlds, you don't want to build it yourself from scratch because you want to focus on, attracting people and holding events and doing the community stuff. You don't want to be running the servers your whole time, so you want to outsource that. So the ones that do this kind of commercial grid, and they set up the website for you and everything, obviously their goods are going to be more private. And the ones that focus more on companies and educators, their goods are going to be more on the private side. And the ones that just host regions on, say, Open OS Grid, those are all going to be public. So on average, 60% of installs are private. And that comes out to a dark metaverse of around 50,000 regions. Ooh. So there's about 50,000 regions out there running on OpenSim that we don't know about. We can't get to because they're in private mode. Now, some more statistics to back that up is I've also added up how many times OpenSim was downloaded. So this is you can download OpenSim from the main OpenSim website, opensimulator.org. You can download a Diva distro or Sim on a Stick or New World Studio, and I'm estimating that
we're talking about downloads of the actual engine to run your own simulators, aren't we? Not the viewer.
Not the viewer. Yeah. But the actual server software. This is what you need if you wanted to run your own regions or grids at home. And that's been downloaded around 175,000 times over the past 3 years. Now, plenty of people downloaded it and went, oh my God, this is way too complicated. Or some people would download it once and then use that one download to install, like they would download Sim on a Stick once, burn it at a bunch of USBs, and hand it out to all their students in the school. So this doesn't mean that there are 175,000 regions or grids out there, but it's a pretty big number. So it's totally reasonable that there are 50,000 regions out there in a dark metaverse that we don't know about. So that's the one news thing that came out this month. And do you have any questions about that? Is there any more details you want to know?
I have just fallen in love with the phrase dark metaverse, but I mean, apart from that, no. It's all good news. They're fantastic numbers. The thought that this is like the dark web, isn't it? The dark metaverse is full of it's being used. It's just not public.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And the dark metaverse is generally being used for real purposes, for creation locally, for businesses, for schools, for education. And all of these people are getting to know OpenSim. And I really believe that at a certain point, you're going to get a critical mass of these people who, like what happened with the early web. You have a few crazy people running websites, a few corporate intranets, a bunch of schools going online. And then all of a sudden, it kind of added up and it suddenly became interesting to visit. And sure, AOL was still the big place. It had everything all in one spot, and to this day, we don't have a single website that measures up to what AOL had. Remember, AOL had instant messaging. AOL had shopping. AOL had news. AOL had its own email system, had its own forums, had a whole bunch of stuff all in one place. No single website today offers all of that. And you go to Amazon for shopping, Google for searching, Gmail or Hotmail for your email. So but that's the strength of the web, is that you can pick and choose the best, and things have an opportunity to compete. So I think the same thing is going to happen in OpenSim. So let's see. The other thing I want to talk to you about this today is it's an interesting story about a company that went out of business 2 years ago called New Voice. Also, they ran something called a Nova Grid. They were running a cutting-edge branch of OpenSim called Aurora Sim, which allowed infinitely sized regions. And some people thought it was really cool. And it crashed and burned disastrously 2 years ago. And the guy who ran it disappeared and hasn't been heard from again until this week. And he came back and with a new company and to get back. So he wrote a really interesting article titled "We Messed Up," going through in all the details about how he messed up the first time and all the mistakes he made, which is great reading for anybody who wants to start their own grid or their own hosting company, is why his company crashed and burned, and he gave all the reasons. So nice and juicy and educational too, because you want to learn from other people's mistakes, not your own.
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah. And then so his company's now back in business, and they used to be known as a really low cost hosting provider. And back then everyone was like, well, you get what you pay for and stuff like that. But this time around, he's still a low cost provider, but we're a little bit more used to it because we have more. We've got people are more familiar with how to get good prices on server farms and how to incorporate cloud servers and all this other stuff. So he's done that, and his prices start at $9.95 a region for unlimited prims. So that's pretty interesting. The limit is on how many visitors you can have. I think it's like 5 or 10 visitors. But that's pretty decent for if you want to have a small personal use region with just a couple of friends who are coming over. $9.95 is a perfectly fine price a month. So I'm going to be adding them to my vendor directory in the next couple of days.
Do they scale up? In other words, can you get an account that would allow you to have something the size of a venue?
Oh yeah, they've got various price points. You can get, more avatars. You can buy entire servers. You can run a whole grid size platform on them. They do everything, and this time also, they launched with a web management panel. Now, one problem some hosting companies have is if you want to do anything to your region, like restart it or change its name, or whatever it is you want to do to it, you have to put in a support request. So you have to wait around for a day or two for them to get around to handling whatever you ask for. And the hosting company has to waste time changing the name of your region or moving it or rotate, whatever, making a backup of it, so forth. So a couple of the hosting providers have self-serve web-based panels where you just click a button and you get a backup, or you click a button and you change its name. Very easy. So Dreamland Metaverse has that, and ZetaMex has that. And now this new company, Sasso, they also made sure that they had it in place before they launched. So they have a web-based management tool, which means that they can focus their support on the big issues. They don't have to waste their time with this little stuff like backups and name changes. And if you want to back up or name change, you can do it instantly. You don't have to pay a fee for it. It's just quick and easy, and you can do it yourself, and you can take as many backups as you want, which is a very important thing anywhere, in OpenSim or Second Life. You want to make sure you've got backups of all your stuff, because you never know what's going to happen. And especially if you're an educator or a company that's invested a lot of money into a build, make backups. Really, I urge everybody, make backups. And before you sign a contract with a hosting provider, make sure that you know how to make the backups, and that the backups are easy and that they work, and that you can use them and restore them again.
And use them elsewhere, of course.
Right,
Do they? You didn't mention, but I assume they're hypergrid enabled as well.
Sasso, yes. You have the option of turning hypergrid on and off. So, and that's the case for all the major hosting vendors like ZetaMex and Dreamland. They will let you do hypergrid, whenever you want to, however you want to. Some of them will even, like Dreamland, will even let you configure it so that certain classes of users are allowed to teleport out. So, for example, if you have a school grid, the teachers can teleport out to other grids to attend events or visit other schools or pick up content and stuff. But the kids have to stay in that grid, and that foreigners aren't allowed to come in and visit. So that could be like a way you might want to have hypergrid set up. Or you could have, and I've seen grids do this, like, for example, Avatar Sex Grid has it set up so that 6 regions are hypergrid enabled. So you can visit 6 regions of the grid. But the rest of the grid, if you want to go see the really juicy stuff, well, you have to be a member. You have to have a paid membership, a premium membership, to go and visit it. And that way, they're keeping the kids out. Well, hopefully, keeping the kids out of those areas. But also, they're marketing it to the hypergrid, so everyone from the hypergrid can come visit and check it out. Then, if they like it, they can get an account and explore further.
Well, talking of the adult grids, I think I noticed one. It was called oh God, I can't remember. It was some weird name. It included sex, and it was mixed with another word, and the two didn't correlate for me. But I think it was either a sim that was opening this week or was advertising some kind of event. I don't know whether you can recall what that is. It's probably something I didn't bother posting.
What was it? Avatar Sex Grid?
Yeah, something like that.
They just reopened after some technical difficulties.
Oh, I see. Right. I won't ask what the difficulties were.
They just had server problems. Nothing dirty. Nothing dirty. It was. Yeah. So we're getting a few of those. I am still disappointed that we're not seeing the kind of promotional activity on the hypergrid that we had in the early web. Remember, you had web rings and blog rolls where people would get together and promote each other's websites?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Grids, hypergrid grids should be doing that because they're not competing with one another, not like commercial grids. You can have a person have a home on one grid, buy stuff on another grid, go to a third grid for an event. They can easily do that on a hypergrid. Have a store on multiple grids and visit all their stores. This is definitely doable. So you want people to travel around, and I'd love to see more themed grids getting together, like various role-playing grids. Have hypergrid events, performances that happen multiple places, or scavenger hunts. Or even simply gates to our partner grids, where you can go through the gate and visit all the grids that are part of that allied group. Because with over 200, 300 public grids right now, you need to have a way of standing out. And the all-purpose gates that link to all the grids, they're too cumbersome. Nobody can find anything on there because we've got tens of thousands of regions on the hypergrid. That's a lot of destinations to visit. You can't have them all in a single gate. But a little hypergrid ring of gates that work together, I think would be a great thing for grids to do, and I really encourage them to do that.
Back when a reaction grid was going, I sort of attempted using stuff from Pathfinder Leicester to build a hyperport. It's like an airport where you have the gates, along a wall and a title above them and walk through to get here kind of thing. But of course, as you said, forget the dark metaverse. Forgetting those ones, there are actually so many destinations now. It's like finding something to do in Second Life. Sometimes you just give up because there's so many things happening, but nothing you actually know. And, there's, it's much easier to stay at home and fiddle around, so to speak.
Right.
And, the open simulator complex, the hypergrid aspect of it is now so vast that, you can keep landmarks for, across the hypergrid, of course. But, there's, I know there's a sort of travel agency on OS Grid, for example, but but even that's relatively small. There's no really good system, like a central place you can go that sort of will guide you, to. There is on the web. You've got Hyperica, for example. But, if you're in World, it'd be nice to go to a building and enter a door saying, landscape destinations or concert venues and sort of,
And that brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up today.
Very good.
So Hyperica isn't just a website. It's also a grid, where we do have a building you can walk into that's shopping destinations, for example. And we also have event boards. This is what's happening now on the hypergrid. The problem with Hyperica has been twofold. First of all, there's so much stuff happening, I can't keep up on myself. And I keep losing volunteers and interns as they go off and do other stuff. Yeah. And we just had the 4096 bug fixed. So I had a whole bunch of workarounds set up so that you could teleport around the hypergrid around this bug that were extremely complicated technical workarounds that are now pointless because it's been fixed. All the latest viewers are updated. You can now teleport anywhere you want. So a lot of work needs to be done in Hyperica to bring it up to date. So since, as I mentioned that we had that new guy opening a hosting company, he bought an ad on Hypergrid Business, and the revenues from that ad, since our hosting is already covered, will go totally towards hiring a Hypergrid researcher, a professional Hypergrid explorer, who will go out and who will find destinations and write little mini reviews and put up and add them to our gate network. So I'm putting this out again. This is the first time I'm making this announcement. I'll follow it up with a post online that if somebody's interested in becoming the world's first professional metaverse explorer, doing it for money, that they should drop me a line, and I'm at maria@hypergroupbusiness.com. It's not a lot of money, and it's not a lot of hours, but hopefully it's going to grow. And it might turn into a Google, not a Google, a Yahoo someday, because we are a curated directory. There's not enough gates right now to do the statistical-based analysis like Google does. But we can do a hierarchical curated directory like what Yahoo used to be back in the old days. And the way Yahoo used to do it is with manpower. They had people doing it because there is no automated way to do this. And Yahoo and all their competing search engines, what they did was they hired hundreds of people to sit at their computers, to surf the web, and to organize everything. And now that's moot because Google uses and other similar engines use statistical analysis. But the web had to grow to a certain point first before you can run the statistics on it. If there's only a few thousand destinations, that's not enough. A few tens of thousands of destinations are enough. You need millions of destinations before you can do the kind of statistics that Google does. And eventually we'll get there. But until then, it's all going to be people power. And you cannot rely on people to submit their own destinations because
for sure.
Nobody has the time. People think, well, if they want us, they'll find us.
And also, they don't.
Or those who do will be those who are spamming their sites.
Exactly. The ones you least want to visit are the ones who'll be promoting themselves all over the place. And the interesting ones, the museums, all that stuff, they won't be.
And some of them don't even know where to promote it, to be honest. I mean, it's not just that they don't have time to submit. They maybe don't even know they can submit. So it's getting the message out there, really.
Exactly.
The human element is desperately needed. This sounds like a great position for somebody because it's it reminds me of the old days. I got on my shelf here, I've got like web guides. These were like monthly magazines, paper physical world magazines that only ever lasted about 2 years because eventually there were more destinations than they could publish. But these things were like yellow pages, and I could look up subjects and things and look at all the things.
We are in that stage right now with the Hypergrid. We've added more content to Hyperica. We're doing more regular articles. Mine There Always is doing a monthly article for us about themed destinations to visit. And we're doing, in addition to my the 15th of the month stats report, I've also added a beginning of the month report about all the events that are happening on the various grids. And that's just going to grow. It's going to keep growing. And with all the stuff of being built and the creativity and the outpouring of the multiple marketplaces and all the stuff that's happening, I think it will eventually draw people in. And just like the web eventually drew people in. If you remember at first, you'd have these websites with no visitors. You'd have a little stats counter on the bottom, and you would see that nobody's visiting any of these websites. Back in 1995, Newsweek ran a big article called "The Internet, Bah Humbug." Have you guys read it?
Yeah, was that Bill Gates? Sorry.
No. It was another guy, another famous book author who's now fallen into obscurity, and he wrote this article, and he said basically, this internet is a fad that isn't going anywhere. I mean, it's like why would you even consider that the internet is going to replace newspapers or magazines? Why would anybody take a computer with them to the beach or on a bus or use them in school? I mean, all this computer-aided instruction is obviously a waste of time. What's really important is the teachers. And the whole idea of internet commerce is a joke, he said. The entire internet does less business in a year than one shopping mall does in a day.
That article was making the rounds recently, wasn't it? Again,
yes.
I saw it recently.
This was in 1995, after Yahoo, after all these Amazon. So it was the handwriting was already on the wall. This was several years bunch of it.
Obviously a Luddite.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
Amazon wasn't around in '95. I think it was more like '96 or '97.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But Yahoo was already up.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Maria says, the writing was on the wall.
And AOL had been around for several years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every year.
So, so the indications are, but the thing is, the guy had a very reasonable argument. You know, Newsweek bought it. A lot of people bought it because it made a lot of sense. And right now, there are people who are using the same arguments about OpenSim. They also make a lot of sense. I mean, our growth is slow. There are more regions than users. You know, there is very little e-commerce compared to in Second Life. All these things are true.
Yeah, but they're true, but it's not so much that your growth is slow, because it's what you were saying earlier implies it's fast. It's just that it's different. The evolution of OpenSim is not like Second Life, full stop. I mean, admittedly, the population isn't all there in one place and jumping all around the place yet. But, as you say, the land space, the virtual land in OpenSim is greater than Second Life. So
yeah,
it's growing.
Yeah, I think what's happening is that it's growing by kind of osmosis. People tell other people, right? And so the more people there are, the more they tell other people about it, the more so it grows like that with a network effect. That means the growth is non-linear. See, there's nobody with a huge advertising budgets selling OpenSim. So the growth is going to be very, very slow at the beginning because, you know, we don't have an AOL, you know, sending out discs to everybody.
The Disc of the Month Club.
We don't we don't even have Second Life sending out discs to everybody. They totally dropped the ball on that. They should have been AOLing out AOL. So but we don't have that big push from anybody. So all we have is word of mouth, and that tends to grow slowly. But the thing about that kind of growth is that it's exponential. It's the famous hockey stick growth curve is that it's not a linear growth. It starts out slow, and then it picks up pace, and then picks up pace, and then all of a sudden you go, whoa, what happened?
Well, you could say that about the web because although you had the AOLs, the early adopters certainly knew. There came a point where, you know, somebody signing up for email on the web and needing to get on the internet because it was the thing to do, they had no concept of this anymore. They simply knew there were these pages you could link to, and there's this way of sending mail. It spread out organically, and you know, it's the argument there is that the world was too vast for the portals, if you like. And even though television and things like that now seem to be getting back into the idea of portals, you know, they become very restrictive because you go to a portal, you suffer the menu system of the portal, if for want of a better word. But let me open this up a little bit. Joyce has been very quiet, and actually there's a great collision here. We'll talk about non-profits later on, but to bring you in, Joyce, you of course work currently with Fleet.
Yes.
So owns Chilbo here, where we're broadcasting from.
Yeah.
Been on here often enough. With Avacon. And
Fleet and I founded Avacon.
Yeah, and not only have you had Real World Second Life Conference, but last year, and Maria's talked about this previously on the show actually, is what we all have, that fabulous OpenSim community convention, as it were, that was totally virtual last year. And, you know, the people that came to that, you know, huge range of talks and demonstrations and things. It brought people in from all over the hypergrid. It was very, very successful, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think especially where this isn't, you know, where OpenSim isn't like Second Life in that way, that there aren't, as Maria was saying, all these sort of connection points gluing people together yet in these various grids. Though it was always a goal that hopefully that would come out of the conference, and we were happy it did. You know, it's sort of that creating those connection spaces are kind of, unless, you know, are kind of elusive at some points to action. But yeah, we had a lot of good response back from it. And I I think it sort of achieved that by bringing a lot of people together in that one space, sharing their work, volunteering together, all that sort of stuff that were from various grids, or from or even were making their first forays into OpenSim, and then suddenly got the chance to talk to each other, whether they were in one grid or another grid, and I think kind of broke down some walls of even knowing that they're there, and starting that exploration in between and conversations between grids, which was good. So I think it was very successful on the community aspect of things.
I mean, I think with the possible exception of Virtual World's best practices in education, long-winded, it's. I don't think I've seen anything in Second Life of that magnitude for so many years. Early in the early days, there were big events of a serious nature, should we say, and there's been nothing like that in Second Life itself for a long while. So that really sort of said to me, right, this is. The grid of grids, the hypergrid, it's an established platform here now, and it's, growing.
And of course, the other side to that too, as we, Philippe and I and Avicon were working very closely with Overt Foundation and people like Justin and Krista and Abaddon and all that, who are quite the core behind some of the OpenSim code. So that was also helpful. So the other sort of side effect of the conference itself, because we were sort of pushing for the best sort of use and best sort of event that we could have, is there was a lot of upgrade of the technology that they were doing along the way, as we were sort of working on planning things to try to get things a little smoother. So it not only brought people together, but it pushed a bit of the technology to improve upon hiccups and things we found as we went planning for things. So it was quite great. I
remember logging in a couple of times a week to stress test these sims and everything, and and then there were 4 sims together, each of which seemed to be able to carry more people than an average Second Life sim, and dedicated servers and dedicated grid for the actual event, of course. So have you any plans for anything similar this year, or in fact anything Avcon might have plans for?
So we're planning to have another OSCC, so another Open Simulator Community Convention. Obviously it's always subversive. So Avicon is organized as a nonprofit, right? And actually we have 501c3 status, and so considered a U.S. public charity. Went through that full process and everything. But all of these projects we take on, it's of the model of getting like sponsorships and fundraising and that kind of things for things to happen. So we plan on having another Open Simulator Community Convention. But there are obviously expenses in play too. So that's always a thing, is hopefully, we were able to bring together some sponsors from various grids and companies to be able to help support putting off last year's, and hopefully that'll be the same this coming year. I mean, we even had a lot of support on the very small level of just like the initial community level for most for grids. And on the small level. So it was nice to see. I don't know if you got a chance to wander around the expo sort of area of the conference, of the variety of people. But in essence, all of those people, paid for the being able to run the conference, because the dedicated servers and, getting, sort of paying somebody as staff to sort of set up the grid and be sysadmin, to the point earlier that stuff takes a certain amount of infrastructure, and all that sort of stuff. And then obviously, and the web hosting and all those other corresponding things that we all have to deal with. So luckily those were able to support it. So, but yes, we plan on having another Open Sim community convention. Beyond that, we have also
is that
sorry. Go on.
Well, it's the fact that it brought together people on the hypergrid together with open simulators that are at the moment wall gardens, Inworlds, Avination, things like that, and it opened up the dialogue. I mean, for example, Avination saying they want to be on the hypergrid, but it's got to reach a certain stage before they'll feel comfortable. But and obviously there were people presenting there who I suspect probably qualify as being in Maria's Dark Metaverse because they came along to present and exhibit things which are clearly behind their own firewalls. The actuality of what they're doing is behind a firewall on a non-public grid, basically. Yet they're able to come to these conventions and actually speak publicly about what they're doing with people working on similar things. So I think it's the all-focus thing on that was great. You didn't just say, hypergrid members only or anything like that. It was an expansive audience and expansive people partaking, really.
Even and to that point, even the idea of bringing people together from these various spaces and grids, the 4096 bug was actually sort of killed within a week of the conference because those that were there were like, why is this? Now they're all trying to hypergrid around and visit each other's places. And they're like, wow, this is really silly. So, it's funny that was another kind of thing that came out of it that, people started talking that had the ability to, and literally within the week after the conference, it was worked on.
Yeah, for 3 years, people said it's an impossible thing to fix. It's so entrenched. It was a one-line fix. One line. All it took for people to get their act together, focus, find it, fix it.
Yeah. It was just sort of realizing it. And I think that's sometimes the issue is maybe, it's the case on anything that, any of the developers, if that doesn't fit beyond their use case, maybe they weren't aware of it, but somebody with that talent that could fix it didn't know, or wasn't experiencing it.
I suspect, it was a great case. We mentioned before the needle in the haystack. This was a needle waiting to be found, but just took the right person to find it. Look, I've got a magnet.
But more than that, it took the viewers and the server developers to come together. Now you gotta remember that they have not been talking. This conference was the first time, really, that a large group of both types of developers were in the same room together, well, virtually. Previously, the viewer guys were saying, it's hard-coded on the server side, we can't do anything about it. And the server side people were saying, it's on the viewer end, we can't do anything about it. Having the two groups brought together and actually taking a look at this, they found out where it was, and they were able to get rid of it.
Yep. And I think experiencing it firsthand, like they were trying to actually move around from grid to grid for what, so. Right. Yeah. Yep. No, so
it's called collaboration, folks.
Yes. So
teamwork.
It worked well, and certainly, Philippe and I were quite pleased that on a community level, it brought people together. On this development level, it pushed things. I don't know if you saw the short video that Nebadon Izumi had made of just all the server commit codes to Open Simulator.
And easily understandable, but yes, quite impressive.
But just the idea that there was all that work going on in that small period of time, leading up to the conference of trying to fix all these various things, certainly for those of us not developing in that way, what threads they were working on probably, don't mean as much to us that you would be able to see in that video, but still the idea that all that effort was going on. Yeah.
I should say, for the sake of it, we're joined by Philippe in the channel chat room, actually. So she's saying hi.
Should tell her to come in World. I poked her in Skype, so.
She says, I've just got in and see Joyce chatting. So there you go. Yes. Well, Philippe, hopefully next week or the week after, or one week. Hi there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry.
So just to finish off the kind of Avicon related stuff. So beyond the Metaverse Cultural Series related stuff, right? Beyond the Open Simulator, we've been running the Metaverse Cultural Series, which is another kind of ongoing series of events. And we ran one in World to Worlds. We ran a few we ran one in Minecraft. We ran a couple in Second Life. We have another one coming up actually on the February 1st. That's going to be also in Second Life. And I just invited you guys to the Facebook group of that, and I'll pass you the link in a little bit. But so that one is another one. So this is sort of more of a smaller event series, right? More on a cultural kind of focus. And then other exciting Avacon news is that we actually set up a grid as of this week, like our own grid. So Maria, you can add that to your list of
oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, partly, and this is a dedicated, our own dedicated server and everything. So, and having Nebadon as well work on helping us with the infrastructure and setup. And I mean, it's still in its nascent period where we're just bringing in staff at this point and building things up. But that'll be a place that we'll be able to hold. At this point, we'll be able to certainly host these sort of smaller events. I'm not sure. And I don't necessarily know if that'd be the right, probably place for the open simulator at this point. But certainly we'll be able to run our smaller events, and have resources in play and have part of it that will be definitely public and have, access to that. So it'll probably be a combination of light and dark in the grid, right?
Yeah, before I move the conversation on, actually,
sure.
Has Avacon got any plans to do anything Second Life specific in the future, either in organic or virtual?
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the Metaverse Cultural Series, like I said, have happened and still happen in Second Life, but I think our focus and even kind of goes back to the formation of like the mission that we kind of put across as well, has always been this broader, kind of metaverse outlook. I mean, of course, we first sort of started, like the first things that we jumped on is because, I had always, myself and others had always been kind of part of helping with the Second Life Community Convention, right? I'd been a volunteer from the beginning, from the 2005 one. And then when the kind of core group of people who were behind that, that were really running that, sort of the last of them stepped away, there were some of us that didn't want to see that just perish, right? The idea of bringing people together of the community. So, which is why we stepped up and, kind of, got others involved, like Fleet back involved into the fold and created Avacon and started by running the Second Life community conventions, right? And we, of course, did, Boston in 2010 and Oakland in 2011. And, they, through the evolution of Linden Lab's focus, a little bit less on direct community involvement of things.
Yeah, I think so, and cooperation with you, for that matter. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. It made because ultimately, unlike, I mean, having a virtual event has a lot of balls in the air as it is, and a lot of obligations and things, right? But a real life event is even more so, when you have contracts for venues and, so the liability aspect got to be a little too high if there wasn't also going to be some help on their part as well. So, so that's kind of what threw the balance in regards to those. But we've, in regards to the focus of Second Life, I mean, it's always part of the mix per se, but they're probably, at this point, unless something really crazy happens, there won't be another sort of focus dedicated in that like solely specific way. So it'll always be, I think, from going forward.
I think
metaverse at large.
Yeah, I think when you've got to focus on the metaverse at large, then maybe a few decades down the road, Second Life will actually want to get involved. But when they become the backwater, they might wake up. Who knows? But that's quite interesting.
And it's still a very important piece, obviously, to all of this, right? I mean, we're here now in Shilbo, right? So in Second Life, so we all, I think, jump between and see that there's important aspects of both. So, but
we've always got our Second Life avatars on the ready. Yes.
Yes.
to do this show and everything else.
Yeah,
Now, I know Maria has another topic which is of interest, which is commercial hypergridding. I think maybe I'll bring Maria in on this and then come back to you, Rhiannon, because I'd also like to talk a little bit about non-profit commons.
Sure.
It's because that I think is of particularly interest in Second Life, of course. But maybe I'll switch back to you, Maria, and we'll chat about commercial hypergridding.
Okay, so commercial hypergridding is when you have a commercial grid with actual things for sale that's open to the hypergrid, so people can move content around the hypergrid. So the problem with that is that some creators don't want their content moving around the hypergrid. Now, this is a very controversial topic, but at the end of the day, the creators should have the right to decide, how people use their stuff. So that's been an obstacle to grids turning on the hypergrid. So there's been movement last year to create a new export permission, and I've been here to talk about it before, I think once before, where instead of the normal 3 permissions, the copy, transfer, and some other one, you get a 4th one, modify, that's it. So instead of copy, transfer, modify, you have copy, transfer, modify, and export. And by default, everything is set to no export unless the creator deliberately sets it to yes for export. And then the buyers can take this content elsewhere or download it and save it as a backup so they can use it on multiple grids. So the 2 big movers in this space have been the Avenation grid and the Kitely grid, which are the 2nd and 3rd largest commercial grids out there. The number 1 grid, of course, is Inworld's. So Kitely and Avenation have both committed a great deal of resources to this. Avenation paid for development of this export permission and got it into the Singularity viewer, and other viewers can pick up the code as well. And Kitely has been working on their own version of the same exact thing. And and specifically, Kitely has just donated 32 different patches and code fixes this past week to make sure that content permissions stick with that content. Because there's a lot of bugs around an OpenSim that mean that the perms aren't quite as durable as maybe you might want them to be, and this happens in Second Life as well, of course. But you really want this stuff to be as locked down, as solid as you can. So Kitely has been putting in a lot of effort to get these fixes in place and donated the fixes back to the community, so that they could enable hypergrid delivery on their marketplace and enable hypergrid connectivity to their grid. And they're shooting to get that happen in the next few weeks. So that's going to be a huge, big advance for the hypergrid. And if Avenation turns on the hypergrid as well, after all the debugging is done, which is what they're working on now, then we're going to have 2 of the 3 biggest commercial grids hypergrid enabled. And some of the other hypergrid owners out there have been, non-hypergrid grid owners out there have been telling me that they're going to keep hypergrid turned off until they see how it works for everyone else. Yeah. And if it's stable, and once it's stable and robust enough, they'll turn it on. Now, for most grids, this means just flipping the switch. Setting export to off for all content by default, telling their merchants how to turn it on for those particular items that they want to sell, maybe at a premium to people to take elsewhere. But basically, it's a simple setting in the grids. The only grid that can't do this is Inworld's. And I was very disappointed to see the article that came out, Daniel Voyager's article about Inworld's plans for this coming year, because they forked away from main OpenSim, and they seem to be doubling down on this technology bet. So that while everyone else shares in all these code fixes that everyone's doing, so the OpenSim Community Convention, huge amount of code fixes. the Department of Defense is hiring 4 full-time people to just do fixes, patches, and make OpenSim more stable. Kitely's making all these fixes.
This is under the Moses?
The Moses grid. Yep.
Yeah, Moses.
Yeah. Because they really need it. They need it.
Yeah.
They're using it through all these government agencies. They really need rock hard stability. So they're investing quite a bit of money into getting that working. So all this stuff is happening, and Inworld is having to match all that development by themselves. So they've been significantly behind other grids when it comes to deploying mesh and media on a prim, and some of their physics has been lagging behind everyone else. So, for example, many grids have been experimenting with bullet physics, which Intel has donated. Now, Intel is a huge organization. They've put resources into this. Intel wants people to buy bigger computers, and virtual worlds require bigger computers. So this is a very pragmatic bet on the part of Intel. But they have been funding developers to work on improving our physics engine. And that's with Bullet Sim, and several grids are trying it out already. So all this stuff is happening, and meanwhile, Inworld is having to do this all by themselves. And it gets harder and harder every year to do it by themselves, because they have to reverse engineer everything that everybody else has done just to catch up.
It seems like a very odd tactic, really.
It is it's very difficult. Every other project that has done that has failed. And the reason Inworlds hasn't is because they've had such a great community. They're a big, popular grid, so they can afford to spend the money on the technology. It makes, from my perspective, my recommendation has been for them to take all this money they're spending on technology and put it into more marketing, event building, sales, outreach, and community building, and just use the same technology as everyone else. Because in the surveys that I've been running, Inworlds has not been scoring particularly well in technology, but it does score well for community and content. That's why people go to Inworlds, not because of the technology.
It's come like a miniature, and probably highly more creative, in fact, but it's become like a miniature version of Second Life, and you've got Second Life going off on its own limb. And the further they go, the less compatible they'll be when they finally decide they want to be. And I think eventually everybody will see the idea of a commonality of addressing and teleporting is important.
So, for example, when Mesh came out in Second Life, the OpenSim developers got together and had it in place in OpenSim the next day. It took like more than a year for Inworlds to get their mesh working. Same thing with media on a prim, with a lot of the latest fixes, and of course all the fixes I mentioned that have been coming out as a result of Kitely and Avination and Moses and the OpenSim Community Convention. So now with every new fix that they make, they're going further and further out on this limb. So Inworlds is the only commercial grid right now that will not be able to turn on hypergrid by flicking a switch, because they don't have that switch to flick. They're a little bit too far out, and they're saying, well, we're never going to want hypergrid anyway because our users don't need it and our users don't want it. That's why they come to us. And the problem with believing your users is that your users and your customers love you until the day they suddenly stop loving you and leave. And there's no warning. The users never give you a warning. They always want what you're offering. That's why they're your customers until the day that they don't want it anymore.
Yeah, until something better comes along.
Exactly. And so right now Inworlds has the most traffic of any grid. So obviously you want to go to Inworlds. They've got the most content of any grid. So you want to go to Inworlds. But consider what happens when the hypergrid security is in place, and Kitely's on a hypergrid, and Avination's on a hypergrid, and some of the smaller grids like Virtual Highway and Third Rock Grid that are kind of like keeping an eye on it, and they turn on hypergrid, then you're going to have a huge amount of content, commercial content, good high quality commercial content lots of events, lots of people, lots of traffic. All of a sudden, I travel the hypergrid all the time for this. It's as easy to hypergrid teleport to another grid as it is to jump to another region on the same grid.
Mm.
I mean, the teleports fail occasionally, but they fail on the same grid too. Is what I'm saying. But so about the same level of stability and difficulty as with regular hypergrid teleports. And you can have hypergrid friends. You can have hypergrid groups. You can send instant messages to people you meet over the hypergrid. And in fact, like my grids on Hyperica, I don't have any local avatars. All my friends are hypergrid friends. All the groups I'm in are hypergrid groups because everyone else I know is on different grids.
That is just so totally the point to me. I mean, as the metaverse expands, I want to be able to go in somewhere and get everywhere. Now, I understand artists, who get lots of prims and space for their money and things might want to have a sim in Inworld, and people might sell fashion in there, but it's not. It's probably not the microcosm of the real world that Second Life has become. But they're both, they're both on, having the doors locked. I mean, especially the more that they diverge with technologies, the more they're just going to suffer when the uniform technologies begin to arrive. I mean, maybe something like Vast Park was suddenly, which uses a location addressing system, will suddenly find itself hypergrid compatible. And I don't know, but there's a danger if you're operating a walled garden thing, you are actually like the AOLs of this world. There will come a time when, however good you are redundant in comparison with the new state of affairs. So
I remember a day, what was it, the Virtual Worlds Expo in 2008, maybe, that, we were all in New York at the conference, and, I sat at a table with Bruce Joy of Vast Park and, Tori, that was, the head of... Tori from Second Life, who was the head of the kind of interoperability when there used to be an interoperability team,
yes,
and all that, and when there was that big dream of we shall all connect, and oh well.
We shall all disconnect and create our own little network. I mean, even Twitter and Facebook can tell you the folly of that. Okay, let's move on to something I'm really anxious to discuss, and that is non-profits. And we're especially when we're talking about hypergrid business and all sorts of other things. We're always talking about virtual currencies and the mechanics behind everything. But there's a whole role in virtual worlds for non-profits, and in fact, I'm sure Tara would love to come in on this because she's spent a lot of her life working for non-profits, although she doesn't at the moment. But it's Maria. I'm gonna love this. I really am. Maria's Dark Metaverse. Many of these installations, wherever they are quite. It might be a business with a development wing behind the scenes and a showroom that's public elsewhere. But equally, it might be something that is just like a non-profit grid, or I think of things like libraries. Not libraries, book clubs. There are lots of book clubs, that probably have chat rooms on the web that have actually moved in world, and they all know each other, so it's not a vast network, but they meet up and they have their book clubs and their readings in world and things. And you can perceive that there might be people that want to use virtual worlds for this, but if it's Puddleton on the Marsh book club, they may not want anybody who doesn't live in Puddleton on the Marsh coming in, so they will have a private venue and they'll get people there. And I think a lot of non-profits and charities also fall into this category. I mean, it really depends on whether they're using virtual worlds to work behind the scenes and to get their work done, or whether on other occasions, of course, it's the public interface. There's always going to be that divide because virtual worlds offer both. But I know, indeed, I've been to a few, but of course they take place in chat. But every Friday, of course, you have the non-profit commons meeting, which covers a whole wide range of stuff. And people, unlike something like this, people can find it easier, of course, to engage with the conversation through chat. Whereas, if we had a vast audience on voice, I think we wouldn't hear ourselves. But maybe just give me a kind of review, maybe, of what Nonprofit Commons is doing, because obviously there are non-profits who are part of the regions that are the non-profit commons, but there is also your Friday event.
Yeah, so Nonprofit Commons is organized, or is a project of TechSoup, which, if you're in the nonprofit sector, you probably know of TechSoup.org, the website, which is kind of a hub for those working in nonprofits and related kind of organizations to be able to get resources and discounted software and help with technology and that sort of stuff. So TechSoup actually started Nonprofit Commons, and initially it was their space was part of Info Island. From the SIM, and there was sort of several kind of philanthropic and educational, and it was sort of earlier on when that was starting to kind of nascently grow, and Nonprofit Commons had TechSoup had space there, and then from there and then jumped to having their own regions, which is where we are now. And there was a large, we had a contingency of kind of a little mini continent back when, like, the State Department and the MacArthur Foundation and those sort of entities were doing research and activities within Second Life.
They were also.
Yes.
One had some great events, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I can speak to that as well. That was during the days of when I worked for Global Kids, and Global Kids was, worked with MacArthur for those projects as well. So, but which those were back way before, when we were discussing events, those held some larger events. Like, we had 4 region sim gigantic events where we brought in people, and so they were all part of this larger kind of like philanthropic focus grid. Sort of region in a way, right? Continent. But the Nonprofit Commons Sims, they still exist, and they've been holding pretty consistently meetings every week since August of 2007. With breaks for holidays and stuff. But so we still hold them now. It's every Friday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, Second Life time, and that draws a kind of a diverse crowd of those that are either working for nonprofits or interested in sort of social good topics, or those that are kind of related, like maybe we have librarians and educators who are also there, counselors, social worker types. To your point of, like, say, the dark metaverse, certainly if, there's a certain subset of people, certain subset of projects that you kind of have to have a lockdown sim for. If you're dealing with anything youth related under, under the age of what Second Life allows into the general public thing, you have to have those as a lock sim with using the Reg API capabilities to lock the avatars directly to those sims. Those are all private grids. I still do some work for a project that is that way out of Georgia Tech, and they deal with disabled student populations. And then there's also, people who are doing sort of counseling, social work, those sort of scenarios where their grids are often closed sims for those reasons too, for privacy related things. Also, even if you look to, I'm sure you're familiar with Virtual Ability.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Virtual Ability is kind of a mix in a way. They have a couple of public sims that they host events on, and then they actually have some private regions that are more for sort of research and specific, projects or private events for just their community. So, you definitely have a mix of that. So, but in the Nonprofit Commons, we have the weekly meetings, as I said, and then there's also sort of surrounding the area where we have in the sim that we have the meetings in, and then in the neighboring sim, we offer up free office space for those that are part of a nonprofit or social good kind of organization or project. So we have at the moment I think, looking at our little thing, 85 offices. I actually put together an infographic recently, and if anybody's curious about these numbers, then I'll put it into our Skype chat as well. But I put together an infographic of sort of some highlights in regards to nonprofit commons. But so we have 85 nonprofits that are directly part of the and have office space as well. So, kind of we have our larger space and then these smaller nonprofits that have their own kind of space to meet with people and do sort of work and that sort of thing. As I pop a link in here to the Skype
While you're
chat.
doing that, and before I forget, in fact, I'll give a quick plug for Metaverse TV because they actually Virtual Ability, of course. I don't think we mentioned this in our year in review. Did actually have a major conference to do with disabilities and things in Second Life. It was last year, and all those sessions were filmed. And Metaverse TV literally just put up all the final sessions up on their channel at YouTube. So if you want to see any of that, check out Metaverse TV's YouTube channel.
Yeah, it was a great conference too. I'm glad you were able to.
It's funny viewing because they insisted on having text on the video and stuff like that. It doesn't look super TV, but it had a function at the time, and great stuff indeed. So some of it was a bit too indulgent for me, but some of it was very addressable, and there's a whole wealth of stuff there. It's all clearly titled, so I'm sure if you're interested in that, you'll find something to watch. Maybe a dozen sessions in all or something.
And certainly back to that idea of the text angle that you just mentioned. I mean, the weekly meetings are held in text only. I mean, there are some special sort of scenarios when we have, like, say, somebody who we need, the only best way might be to bring them in through a voice, or if it's something interactive enough, or or we're sort of broadcasting a conference sort of thing. But
I have a big label over my head saying, "Don't do voice." I'm sorry, don't do text. How people in Second Life always say, "Don't do voice," while I say, "Don't do text."
Certainly, when you get a certain number of avatars together, controlling voice always does become a problem if you're leading an event. If we go back to the idea of those MacArthur Foundation sims where you'd have 4 regions put together, often we would turn off voice and just use, audio streaming for the program itself during the event, right? That would kind of help cut down on that sort of stuff. In regards to the nonprofit commons meetings, it's sort of a twofold. So it does help to, we have about usually 25 to about 35 people a week, which is pretty good for an ongoing event that we have. We have a pretty steady crowd every week, and it ebbs and flows who might be there. We have a kind of a core group of the people who are, say, directly part of the nonprofit commons itself, and then those that are kind of more loosely interrelated from other, organizations or other people from like ISTE who will come over, or those sort of things, right? But the text also, there's sort of a secondary reason for text, and partly for what you brought up in regards to your video production for Virtual Ability, is it makes it very accessible, right? So we have, where we do have kind of a diverse crowd in, and we kind of also have to make a nod to anybody who's coming in with, who might be accessing Second Life through something like Screen Reader or something like that. It makes it a lot easier. So that's the other big reason. And the bonus to that is that we get a transcript that we can easily kind of blog and send out or, point to. So that's kind of, but yes, it does some things. Like we recently had, just that last week, we had Draxter Dupre present, and it was kind of a funny hybrid of things we did. We had the event in text as we normally do, but then he was sort of desktop broadcasting from Twitch on Twitch.tv and sort of talking. So we kind of had this multimedia layered thing of, like, listening to Draxter, sort of re-say aloud sort of as he was typing, and then sort of other commentary, and it was interesting. So, we do have some breakouts, but it's the majority of the reason for the text, and most of the time it works pretty well. And I think it actually lends to, it becomes a pretty like engaged, chatty crowd, which is good for what we're doing. We get a lot of people actually weighing in their thoughts and what they're doing and thinking about as the presentations go on, which that would be an impossible thing to do in voice.
Tara, do you have any thoughts on non-profits while we're at it? I know you have a history in this field.
Well, I'm just delighted that nonprofit commons continues to thrive. Actually, the original TechSoup site, which was I think it was a 512 on Info Island, was one of my early stops in 2005, 2006, 2005.
Mine as well.
Because I had, I was at that time I was working for a nonprofit, and I was the resident geek and communications person, and had connected with TechSoup, which had saved us as a nonprofit significant dollars because of the TechSoup setup, which enables software sellers to provide free or very low cost licensed copies for nonprofit use. So I was, I saw the posting about them being in Second Life, and I said, I've got to find them, and and just check out what they're doing. And, it was, it was kind of the standard 3D business card at that stage.
Yes.
Some time ago, but it's one of those things that I've often wondered if nonprofits, and particularly helping professions kinds of nonprofits, have sussed to the potential uses of virtual environments for things like support groups. I mean, you and I both know there's plenty of support groups around that are using Second Life or using OpenSims for that matter. I mean, that's especially when you start talking anything in the U.S. with any remote connection with the healthcare field, confidentiality and privacy is essential. Partly by regulation, but also because you just don't have an effective interaction without it. So speaking of the dark metaverse, one of the questions that comes to my mind is I kind of wonder how much of that is things like mental health programs.
And I know if you're familiar with if you've gone to any of the nonprofit commons meetings, we have some people who've been longtime members of the community that are from Preferred Healthcare that do substance abuse counseling.
Yes. That's been a big one. Yeah. They've certainly been around since early days.
Yeah, so certainly for those sort of a lot of these sensitive things, and as you said, even just general support groups. I mean, consistent we have the weekly meeting. We also have other kind of resident sort of other member events that go on. Like speaking of a Preferred Healthcare, Corin Mayo, who's sort of head of that project.
Mayo Clinic.
I was trying to come up with his name. It wasn't my head right away.
So he actually even hosts on Tuesday nights a regular social sort of event in Nonprofit Commons. And we have a couple of members who are doing various support groups, throughout the week, whether it be for depression or just general kind of sort of support, meditation, get together kind of things. Mm-hmm. We have some other kind of things. So I mean, there's been and that's, and to your light of the whole dark metaverse, as at least in my case of trying to I pretty much play kind of the community manager and host at this point of all these things. So. As much as I can, I try to bring those things to life, because some of the projects are pretty evident, but a lot of the times the people are meeting and then, coming together in the weekly meetings, and we're, sharing best practices or talking about technical things. But it's great when we can get people that are doing these projects that maybe aren't so public facing to come in and talk about their work and sort of present the stuff that we can't all kind of visit. We had an interesting one too, a few months back, Latino youth sex education that was going on, and they came to talk to us and sort of brought down the walls to their, kind of opened up their Sims to us for after the meeting for a tour even, which wasn't normally public,
Mhm.
So so there's been great things like that, and there's still a lot of people doing good engaging work out there, and to sort of akin to Maria's idea of the Hypericum, and kind of a thing on that. There's even some people who are there's an avatar Ewan Bonham in Second Life, who's a educator, and is trying to get together sort of a group of these kind of communities in a community sense, things like nonprofit commons, or even broader, like when you think about like Caledon or any of the, which are more or things like that, but communities that are actually kind of living, breathing places where people are getting together and have some sort of interaction between each other, and he's putting together a kind of community gateway of people that are doing this work and still in Second Life, which that hasn't, it sort of ebbed and sort of flowed over time, and places like NMC and things like that used to be a little bit more of a hub for that. But
true.
now, now I think, there's obviously, there's still a good core of us that are pretty active and kind of jump around to each other's meetings and try to keep that alive. But there's still, and this goes back to your, like, still using sort of Second Life. I think for the community at large stuff, and the serendipity aspect of being able to kind of go back and forth, Second Life still has kind of a foothold in that regard. And so
it's the kind of where else can you, it's kind of that where else can you drop in to a fellow professional who is not, wouldn't meet in real life. In other words, they're doing something allied to what you do, but you wouldn't collide in real life. But you can easily collide and swap information in environments like this.
Yeah. And we have brought in people too from doing. It's funny too, there's, as time has gone on, where there is sort of this central hub with the nonprofit commons, people's work spreads out, right? Like even somebody like Corn Mayo, as we were talking about, they're now doing their work outside of Second Life, but they're coming there, but they're still coming, they're still meeting in Second Life with us to share this, and you get a lot of that, I think, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the whole Vibe, the science Vibe Open Sim grid. And so, we've had them come in and present, and actually they still have a foothold in Second Life as well. So you get a kind of lot of interesting things as people sort of continue to kind of maybe, have their own grids for their private programs, or sort of start off on Open Sim, but then still kind of come back to where these communities are meeting to be able to share.
I think we're back. I often, despite what we said about Inworlds and Second Life being on a hiding to, walled garden annex of their own, I tend to still refer to Second Life as the high street of the metaverse, if indeed that's so, because conceptually I see creative work, especially with Mesh, increasingly done offline. I see people with their own locally hosted open simulators, and maybe switch the hypergrid on and off as appropriate for them. And, the production, the warehouses, all this sort of stuff is elsewhere. And what comes into Second Life now is like the showrooms, the shop fronts for the high street, not the factory, or the secret board meetings and things like that. And, it's a lot of intriguing things, like in Second Life, for example. I know the health service in Britain and America is different, but the National Health Service, although it's done by Imperial College in London, have some amazing hospital builds and stuff. And I believe that at least one of them, St. Mary's, is in Second Life. I don't know whether it's advertised to go to, because they actually train surgeons in there. They've got all the kit as 3D objects, and they train them. And, certainly that is the sort of thing you don't expect to be going on in public. On the other hand, you could argue that seeing my doctor is a non-profit occupation. I don't know. But, we envisage things like the future where I would just be able to log in and, he's not going to give me a proper physical examination online, but with all the toys we've got now, there's no reason I couldn't see his avatar and he couldn't demonstrate things to me, or read my vital signs through some kind of USB stick and things. So there's a lot of convergence coming away, and of course this is going to be great for business, as Maria will know, but it's also going to be great for public service, I think is the word I would use, as well. So it's all very fascinating, but I love the way you more or less said, in the non-profit sphere alone, a lot of those probably account for some of Maria's dark metaverse. It's
the open sim setup is pretty much a perfect case for nonprofits because. Except when you go into public events like this one and various other gatherings where you go to Second Life, you normally bring your own users with you. You don't need to have for a lot of nonprofit events. You don't need to have access to the public. In fact, you don't want to have the public anywhere near you. You can have a grid running completely behind your firewall, totally within all the federal regulations, the HIPAA Act, and everything. And if you don't have the technical expertise, there's hosting companies that will actually come in and set up your grid and then leave and then come back only if you need something fixing. So you don't even need to have this kind of expertise in-house to set it up. And it's closed off from everybody. You don't need the public there, and the price is basically a tenth of what you're going to pay in Second Life for the same performance.
Yeah. Well, it's a very old argument, of course.
Yep.
But it is very much cost too. The educational community, and I'm sure Rhiannon would agree, the non-profit communities have had endless hurdles maintaining their sims and facilities at a reasonable price because of Linda's policy. Whereas on OpenSim, of course, you can get a far better bargain, especially if you don't want to be in public. So,
certainly, there's been the billing issue scenarios here, and there was that period of time that they had taken away the educational nonprofit discount. That's back again, but probably a lost opportunity for those that left in the interim because often, especially for educational and nonprofit related things, you have to kind of budget for these things in a more forward-looking way, and just so.
And at the end of the day, it's also a matter of trust. If you feel like you've been betrayed on that deal, and 2 years later, Linda and Nubs come and bring it back. I mean, are you really going to go back, or will they sort of revoke it again after another year? You've lost the sort of implicit trust you had.
Yeah, and anybody who's dealing with an administrator or some higher up that you have to kind of justify these things to. I mean, that becomes a hard, trust is varying things, but even in the business angle, that's something that you've got to know what your budget is.
And that's I think that's particularly significant in the whole nonprofit sphere because as you say, Rhiannon, it's budgeting is done on an annual basis, and your fundraising is geared to your best expectations of being with it, of operating within your budget. And so if some category suddenly doubles in price, that can, so much for the budget process. I mean, it just, you just don't play that game. If you've got that sort of risk, you really look for ways to mediate it.
Yeah, no, certainly. But we do and TechSoup has tried to, like I said, we continue to keep the idea that there is still, free community space. In exchange, though, obviously, like we have these office spaces for members of the community, but we also, in exchange, hope that, that they're kind of signing up to contribute on a volunteer basis too. So, which helps the community, sort of feeds back in and of itself. So, I mean, that gives a way for at least some smaller orgs to come in and have at least a footprint and some place to meet people, and so we have some we have definitely some orgs there that for their front facing stuff have probably never had another space in Second Life than what we have as what they have as their office in our sim. And then there are other people, like I said, Corin and others who are doing projects wherever but still have an office in nonprofit commons and as their place to like meet with peers and talk on their work.
And I have to say, I think one redeeming feature still, Second Life still has it in its favour, is that if you're bringing new people in, they can probably adapt and connect with the community easier to get a grounding for what's going on in somewhere like Second Life before they actually learn the mechanics of how to have an open sim and stuff like that. So it's a very easy place. I mean, they've still got a downloader viewer and all that stuff, but it's sort of known. It's ubiquitous. It may have a rather odd reputation with some people, but it's the known place where you can pull people in and get them started in, in virtual worlds, if that's a acceptable expression.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly. Sorry for the parrot noises in the back. My parrot's happy. Certainly, for there's issues with onboarding into Second Life can be pretty hard, and it takes a little bit for people to really get the ropes of things. And I think community and having a community of support people you can turn to, whether that be, a professional community that revolves around a nonprofit or educational way, or even, if you find a community that's, a role play or a themed community that's, of affinity to you. And I think community in general is a good sticky point for people to be able to have a place of support and get the space and stick around and learn to love interacting.
Somewhere like Chilbo here, for example, which is built as a mainland community. You sort of, if you want to bring them in, then arrange to get them a slurl, not to a, Second Life gateway, but, a direct slurl so they can sign up for Second Life, download the view and come to this is that spot. You meet them and you introduce them. But the thing is that if you're not online, they can probably come back later and find people around who they can talk with. So whereas unfortunately, when I often log into OS Grid, which is my home grid at the moment, and there'll be nobody around. I mean, there'll be maybe a few people, as Maria says, showing up in my groups, so the hypergrid groups, so I'll be tempted to go somewhere else. But Second Life still has that wonderful function of having enough people around almost anywhere you land. Well, except the deserted places like galleries, which are actually nice when they're deserted, to be honest. No lag, I like it. I love empty places, sometimes. But, it's a good jumping off ground still, simply because it does have that population, I think, be it for business, non-profit.
Bringing this kind of around to sort of some of the Avicon stuff. I mean, that's sort of a key thing that we think of, that kind of is at the cornerstone of some of our thoughts, right? Community in general, right? Like I said, we were starting this stuff from from the Second Life community conference stuff, right? And then as the community evolved and we evolved, and like I said, our mission was wider anyways. But now that, people are in open sim grids or maybe, off trying, some other kind of closed grid or here in Second Life, as we all kind of, evolved, that sort of community of interest in these topics still exists, but how do we connect each other? I mean, and I know Maria, has talked about these things as well, and I think that's part of a cornerstone of sort of some of that, listing these various grids, and Avicon has thought about that too, and tried to manifest that with, say, the Open Simulator community conventions and other future kind of things that we think about trying to do for initiatives that help to ultimately, whether we're working or playing here in Second Life or in some open sim grid or somewhere else, the people themselves could still connect and have a community and know what people are doing. And that's important, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. Communication and community.
Yes.
Is what it all boils down to, really. It's just we have these enhanced ways of doing it, which more power to them. Okay, I'm going to pull back a little bit here. I love our open-ended conversations on this show. We sometimes go on forever, but bearing in mind it's Meek's first date, he won't be back again shortly. He's going to be exhausted. I'm just going to refer to a couple of my Inworld links, so to speak, that I didn't mention earlier. Not really much, but. And if you know about any of these, do butt in. One of the big things that's been talked about at the LEA 12, in fact, at the moment, is an installation called Paper Observatory. I have some very nice pictures in front of me, courtesy of Kara's Corner, which, of course, is Kara, secondlife.blogspot.com. That's Kara, and I think you know the Second Life bit, all one word, karasecondlife.blogspot.com. And she's got a piece on that was she put up just yesterday, and some lovely pictures there. So that's one for my my visiting. By the way, I had hoped we were going to have Honor Macmillan here today, but she has a terrible case of the flu, so she's watching this by any chance. We really do wish her the best. We know what that can be like. We'll see you in 2 weeks, probably. Right, and beyond that, one of the lifestyle feeds, he actually covers a lot of gay community coverage, I think, in Second Life. Is I see odd posts from him, but very interesting one this week. It's at Bock SL. Oh yeah, BOCKSL.blogspot.com again. And the blog post just says looking for speakers, but I was quite intrigued. An avatar called Katya Valeska has put out a group notice. There's going to be a conference for all Second Life bloggers, and it doesn't specify fashion bloggers or anything like that, just all Second Life bloggers. And it's going to be held on February 7th to the 9th, 2014. 3-day conference, discuss everything under the sun, from fashion, photography, Photoshop, talking to designers, or just blogging in general. And if you go to that address that I gave you and you're interested in taking part or whatever, there's basically, if you want to actually partake, as it were, in something rather than just attend, there's a link to an application form and a list of topics that provisionally on the agenda and stuff. So that could be very interesting. It's a long while since I'm actually on a group called SL Bloggers, which used to be very active, but there were so many over the years. It's sort of, it's. I mean, I have a bad enough job each day trawling through headline feeds, let alone reading half of them. There are so many out there, but it does sound rather exciting. So if you're interested in blogging, check that one out. I'm very. I don't know. I normally steer clear of things like religions and stuff in Second Life, actually. Are they non-profit or are they propaganda? I've got very funny opinions here, but I know Tara particularly has sympathies with Buddhism, for example. And there's a blog here from a blog called Engaged Dharma. Engaged. I'll read you every letter. ENGAGEDDHARMA. And that's actually engagedharma.com. And they just had a rather interesting piece on 2014, the year of thinking differently, and concerns virtual worlds and things. So that was just an interesting link if you're into that kind of thing. Were you going to come in on that, Tara?
No, I'll have to check that one out.
Oh, right. Okay. Just
curiosity to see what they have to say.
Just a golf, right. There's also a new paste. I've actually got this at Mrs. Debbie Sharma blogspot.com. Basically, it's yet another post for Join the Team, Make a Difference. Relay for Life continues as always, and they are looking for people to get involved who want to partake and make a difference, basically. So I just actually go straight to relayforlife.org and look up the Second Life bit for all details. Linda and Endowment of the Arts have issued one of their own posts today. Was it today or was it? No, Quan Lavender posted it. Advertising Fuchsia's collection, which is at which LEA? Does it tell me? Yes, it does. Here we are. This is at LEA 22. And oddly enough, it just says Fuchsia, but I'm pretty sure this is Fuchsia Nightfire, who is a wonderful creator. And she makes good machinima too, on occasion. And one of the big events that I think Safia is involved with this, but this is definitely Designing Worlds material. There's the annual 2014 Home and Garden Expo happening in Second Life, and the news this week is it's basically being postponed. Instead of being May 13th through the 27th, it's now going to move to near the end of the year, and this year it's going to be the 16th to the 28th of September. So if you're into your home decor and home and gardens decor and plants and stuff like that, just know that it's going to be later rather than earlier this year. So, yes, that looks like it for those things. So I've got those out of the way. Okay, sticking maybe with Second Life or any other of the grids really. Any before we sort of wrap up, as it were, any up and coming events or things you'd like to plug while we're here? Maybe I'll start with Maria.
Well, the Summer of the Arts is going to be happening on Metropolis Grid, and it happens every couple of years, and it's a multi-grid event. So if you want to get involved in that, if you're an artist, look them up. Speaking of artists, Littlefield Grid is also opening up Littlefield Art Gallery, and they have exhibition space for artists as well. So that's something else that you should look up.
Okay, that's good. And I'm pleased to say, actually, I've been getting a few videos through from the Littlefield Grid. They're actually clearly holding concerts there and things. I think one of them is coming up later. It's actually a concert filmed on Littlefield Grid. So it's nice when we get all these machinima things coming in from places other than Second Life, proving that it can be done anywhere. Rhiannon, anything up and coming on your agenda?
Sure.
Either things you're interested in or directly involved with?
Sure. So on the Avacon side of things, the link for the upcoming February 1st Metaverse Cultural Series event, which actually is sort of a carryover from our 2013 Metaverse Cultural Series. It'll be February 1st at 3 p.m. SLT time, and the link, if you want the sort of Facebook event link, but we'll be putting more information on our site itself directly. But you can go to now http://bit.ly/senses places, all one word, which is the kind of artist's title of that particular thing. It should be interesting in actually that it's a kind of a performance art piece that's happening in Lisbon, in Japan, and also in Newfoundland, and there will actually be people in the real life venue in Lisbon, in Portugal, and they'll all be kind of have webcams on in their sort of geographic locations, dancing that are triggering avatars that are moving in Second Life. So we'll also be in Second Life, and
you mean wearable tech and that stuff?
Yeah, like they're actually webcams. So
right.
It should be neat, and like I said, that's on February 1st, and you can come into Second Life, or we'll have a link out that will put out more information on our main avacon.org site on viewing it, say from the web. But that should be neat, and as for avacon.org, our site, we actually redid everything, so go there, take a look, tell us what you think. And for Nonprofit Commons, certainly we, like I said, as we host weekly events, so if anybody's interested in presenting on their work or other kind of relevant tech, whether it be like Oculus Rift or kind of other Internet of Things, 3D printing related stuff that we all kind of think of as this sort of interconnected to the metaverse, then you can kind of either shout at me in Second Life as my avatar, Rhiannon Chat Noir, or even email me through TechSoup, which would just be Joyce at TechSoup.org, and you can kind of ping me about coming to present. Otherwise, outside of that, I don't know if you know, speaking of Machinima, Machine Evo, which are sort of a group of educators that do kind of a yearly boot camp for Machinima education. That's actually going on right now. I'll try to find the link to that. But it started like last week, and it's, I think, a 3 or 4 week related kind of boot camp for, educators predominantly, or that come together sort of to learn machinima filming. So I'll find that link. But that's kind of the interesting thing off the top of my head recently. So.
Okay. Well, great. We look forward to all that. I can't remember it all. You'll have to post it all so I can look it up. I tend to rely on my incoming feeds and then bookmarking them and then checking my own bookmarks. So, it's
Do all these links end up in relation to the show notes or that you share, or is it just from
no, unless it's actually typed into the chat room on the channel. We don't actually have a system for including links with the show, but they can usually hear us.
True.
Well,
true.
They might struggle with my mumbling over certain links, but they'll get there in the end, I'm sure.
And Rhiannon, you could always, after Mal posts the replay on Google Plus, and it's actually on YouTube. You could always add a comment in the thread for the show if you wanted to add a.
Sure. I actually forget to announce this, but just a reminder for anybody who hasn't heard the announcement before, we do. There is actually a group in Google Plus you can look at called Metaverse Week in Review for the whole show, and the whole show, Inworld Review is put there too, and links to YouTube. But that's free for comments and participation and stuff too. So it's we do get a few people posting there other than ourselves, so to speak. Okay, Tara, roundup.
Just a couple things. I forgot to mention at the beginning that you may have noticed in the camera shots, there's a new kitty sitting on the arm of my chair. This is Samba, and Samba is a very special kitty. Samba is a menagerie kitty. The kitty cats is set up so that when kitty cats get past breeding age, or whenever, you can send them off to the menagerie where they will get to frolic forever. But you no longer have to feed them or care for them or have them take up prims in your sim. And
I'm looking on Joe's monitor here, and it looks like a baby tiger.
Yes, it is. It's
okay.
a tiger. And what happens is, every time you send a kitty along to the menagerie, you get kitty cat credits, and you build up a certain number of kitty cat credits. And then you can buy, with those credits, you can buy a tiger. And you can buy tigers in various sizes, and there's also 3 different colors. It takes a lot of them. It isn't something you do in a couple of weeks. And I finally hit the magic number, and I got myself the orange tiger, and I bought they come in all the sizes that kitty cats come in, except you get to choose the size, unlike otherwise sizes as they are birthed are random. And so this is a megapus, and so this is as small as she will ever be. And by the time next show comes around, she'll be as big as Hieronymus, who is the Siamese, who is a permanent resident here.
Wow.
Anyway,
how many cats did you have to retire into?
Well, you have to get up to, like, for this size, 15,000 kitty dollars. And you get, I think it's $50 kitty dollars per kitty cat sent to the menagerie, so you can do the math. It's a bunch. It's a lot.
Is this a common problem in Second Life, where people buy these wild cats and then find out that they can't keep them and need to find a permanent home for them?
No, it's more people who get into breeding them. And unless you perma-pet, which costs, which is a special process costing extra lindens, so you never have to feed them again, you have to keep buying food for them. And so if you're a breeder, when they pass 120 days and are no longer breeding, then
why?
Yeah, well, this is
sad.
Well, it's a good thing,
These things, when they may not be too prim heavy in their own right, but when you've got whole yards full, I mean, elsewhere in Chilbo, Tara has a cattery. She also has a mobile cattery somewhere else, I think, on the stand. She has huge hidden catteries in the sky.
That's the word.
They do add up to quite a few prims when you're breeding them.
It is particularly the impact on having to get to kibble to keep them going. So if you're breeding, once they pass breeding age, or once you know that all they're going to breed is a particular thing, then you may want to send them off to the menagerie, so you're no longer having to feed them, and you can.
So is this menagerie an actual place, or do they just go poof?
Well, no, the kitty cats are run significantly from a back-end database that's exterior to Second Life. And so obviously their database keeps track of every kitty cat that's ever been born. And they've got some kind of I'm on the geeky side, I suspect it's simply some flag on that kitty cat record that says it's a menagerie kitty. There isn't a physical place, at least they have not yet ever announced a physical place where you can go visit the menagerie. I would be surprised, though, if there isn't at some time a short-term offering.
Tampon res sort of way.
A place where you can go visit the menagerie.
This is crazy stuff. Personally, I think there should be a kitty cat's grid, and they can have the menagerie there.
Anyhow,
we'll just hypergrid over to the menagerie and see what's available as expired pussies.
Yes. Anyway,
lovely
just
stuff.
two other quick items. Apropos critters, a little item that just turned up in the Twitter feed. Mark your calendars. March 1st to 31st will be Furry Fair 2014. And there'll be more on that when there's more information available, but we'll include information on furries, live performances, shows, and freebies. And the other thing I wanted to mention, since we're in Chilbo, is a reminder that Korkosman Boom, who is a Chilboite, is one of the current short-term exhibitors at the Lennon Endowment for the Arts. And he has stuff out and has invited folks to come visit LEA 17. That's it for me.
Okay, and of course, another in that temporary exhibition is our wonderful camera woman of days past, Pet Love Pet Shop. She has an installation there for that temporary exhibition too. So
yes.
do check out that one. Okay, well, I think we've all exhausted ourselves one way or another. Great show, great conversation. Nice and serious too, which is always good. Well, except the kitty cats, of course. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Thanks especially to Meek for coming in on camera today. I've been watching the monitor and it all looks absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Gio. Thank you, Rhiannon Chudmar, or Joyce Bettencourt. She's equally known as both, so I don't think she'll take offense at me mentioning both.
I'll answer to both.
Yeah, indeed. And great, interesting stuff. And I hope to have you back again sometime in the future. Great conversation. And also thank you to Maria Korolov, 2 weeks in a row. What more could you ask, eh? Thank you, Maria.
Well, thank you again for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, it can't shut me up.
And believe it or not, bang on time, I've got a window open here saying, "We're sorry, but Firestorm has crashed." It doesn't seem to have crashed. I think I'm still here, so I better hurry up and kill the show. Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll be back same time, same place next week, if that makes any sense to you at all. This show will be available to replay up on YouTube, and of course it will be part of the Metaverse Week in Review on our live stream channel at MetaWorld 2, which is where we're going now. I'm going to press a magic button and transfer us back to the playlist on the channel, where we've got about 3 hours of all this week's greatest and best machinima to show you. Chunk of machinima storytelling films, some art exhibits and art things, a few music clips, destinations, and what else have we got? Oh yes, a little bit of lifestyle. Oh, and performance. We've got it all, folks. Really, we've got a mix every week of everything you could possibly imagine that's turned up in the week that's broadcastable, inverted commas. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
Cool.